Welcome to Critical Rep, a podcast where we explore representation in popular film media using a critical lens. We are two sociologists that want to expand our knowledge of representation in media and want to take you along for the ride. I'm Kat.
And I'm Jenna.
And we're going to bring you critical analysis of one TV show or movie per week that tackles some serious topics, including race, sex and gender, class and justice, and much more. So join us for a fun and interesting discussion of some popular shows where we delve deep into how and what they represent for those watching.
And please note, this is our perspective on representation and not on the brilliant people who work hard to bring us film media. But representation matters in this and all forms of media. Since so many people are exposed to these popular shows and movies, it can make someone feel seen or depict issues that mirror reality or even popularize problematic tropes. Join us as we explore the possibilities and constraints of popular film media. In this episode of the Critical Rep podcast, we discuss sex education. Here are your hosts, Jenna and Kat.
Hi, how are you, Jenna?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Excited about today's discussion. Sex education is such a good show.
It's so good. It's so good. I love the normalization of sex.
Oh, me too. And the awkwardness. I can't get over how funny it is with the awkwardness.
It's so good. It's so great.
Yeah.
So I'll give a little synopsis on the show, and then I've also kind of compiled a partial list of some of the topics that they talk about.
Awesome.
So the title of this synopsis is from IMDb. The title of this British series is derived from the education of the main character, Otis Milburn, and his classmates in high school. His mother, Jean Milburn, is a sex therapist. Through a series of events, Otis becomes a sex therapist in school for his fellow high school students. This accidentally happens and is recognized by Maeve Wiley. Maeve sees the financial potential, so she forms an agreement where she will find the sexually needy customers for Otis and handle all the business aspects, collecting the money. So Otis only has to counsel his classmates in the same manner as his mother does for adults. His mother is very blunt, so dealing with uncomfortable situations comes naturally as he grows into becoming a therapist. The show uses sex therapy theme to introduce classmates Otis and Maeve, but the show is really a high school coming of age story. So that's basically the brief synopsis. Now, very briefly, yes.
I'm excited.
Oh, okay. I thought you wanted to interject. I was like,
no, I'm excited because I know you've prepared some interesting topics.
Yeah, I actually spent the last week or so rewatching the first season.
Oh, great.
So that I could get a list of topics, because there were a few that I remembered from watching it, but then I remembered a few more when I watched season 1 again.
Nice.
So in no particular order, some of the general topics that are covered in the show are homosexuality and drag, internalized homophobia, blackmail, vagina shaming, bullying, asexuality, pansexuality, economic status, gender. I have some things to say about that later. Homophobia and transphobia. Remaining in the closet, STIs and the lack of knowledge about STIs, trauma and sexual assault and victim blaming. And those are just a few of the topics that are covered in the show, and only from season 1, except for asexuality, which is definitely in season 2.
Yeah, fair. Oh my gosh, I'm excited. So, do you want to start with, I guess, just homophobia, and we can sort of go from there?
Yeah. So that is all over the show.
Yeah.
Um, the character Eric, who is played by Chudi Gatwa, is a black gay teenager. I believe he's 16 when they start the show. And he experiences homophobia from a classmate named Adam, his father. And in one episode, on his 17th birthday, him and his best friend Otis get into drag to go see a screening of Hedwig and the Angry Inch. And on his way home, he gets jumped by some men, who start off calling him Miss and something else, and then basically are like, "Oh, Miss, do you need any help? Miss, oh, do you have a penis hidden away, Miss?" Or something along those lines. They get out of the car and they beat him up. Um, and there's some transphobia both from them, but there's also transphobia from Eric in that moment. Because as they're getting out to beat him up, he says, "No, it's just a costume. I'm not like that."
Mm-hmm.
So there's that issue. However, for the character, that storyline makes sense, but I think that it's something that the show should cover a little bit more. I'm trying to think if there's any other like specific homophobic issues. I think they primarily come from those general
Yeah.
directions in the show.
Yeah, I think there's some stuff in season 2 where they introduce a new character, and there's like this
I love
question
him.
of like if he's, gay or not, and then it turns out that he is.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think that you bring up a really good point about that moment where Eric is, getting beat up or about to get beat up, I guess. He makes that comment that is transphobic, and like you say, it makes sense for the character development and sort of demonstrating the internalized shame involved in being someone who is part of the LGBTQ plus community and going through your own process of coming
Mhm.
out or realizing that you might be a part of that community, or um, whatever else is involved in sort of the emotional um, journey that you go through as an
Mhm.
individual. But I do agree that that's an interesting point to bring up as far as they didn't address that as being
Mhm.
transphobic, and it truly is, and it's interesting how it sort of shows up in something so subtle, in a show that's like so progressive in the sense that they're just
Totally.
talking about sex because nobody talks about sex,
Mhm.
not in North America.
Um, yeah, actually, as we were talking about that, another example of Eric specifically being transphobic popped into my head. And it's when Lily comes over and she doesn't know that he's gay yet. And then she looks in his closet and says, "Oh, do you like to dress up like a lady?" Some like, and then the conversation goes on. He's like, "Oh, I just, sometimes I just like do it for fun, but like I'm not a lady boy or anything like that," which is another highly transphobic statement, um, that I hope that they address. There is a
Mhm.
season 3 coming soon,
Nice.
um, so I'm hoping that the writers will address that at some point. I don't know a lot about British television or about like British culture in general, really. So I don't know how likely it is that that will be addressed, but I hope that it will be. Are you
Yeah.
kidding me?
Are you okay? Okay. Yeah. You can probably cut this out, but like you were looking for that for so long.
I put my foot down, I felt something, I looked down, I was like, oh, there's the answer.
I knew it. I knew you'd find it.
Mm,
Oh my gosh. Okay.
and back on track. Um,
Um, yeah, no, I think that I can't say that I know sort of the cultural aspects of sort of the British television thing either.
yeah.
But I do appreciate sort of how this show approaches a lot of issues in sort of like a humorous way, but it's like also a pretty serious, like they have serious moments and they have
Hmm.
moments that are I guess I don't know if this is the right word, but like sobering in the sense that it's tackling these serious issues like transphobia or homophobia
Hmm.
and making it into something that's like, you know, understood and feels real in the sense
Yeah.
that, you know, like these are depictions of what could happen in real life.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I appreciate that the show normalizes a lot of things.
Hmm.
Um, and for the storyline, I suppose that it makes sense that certain things are left out. Like in a suburban, like small rural town in England that is actually, I'm not going to say that it's predominantly white because there are quite a few BIPOC characters on the show.
Hmm.
Um, it would make sense that they don't know a lot about trans people because typically, if you're trans and you live in an area like that, you move to a big urban center
Yeah.
to be in a safer space. Um, and a lot of the show, I find, actually does a great job at pointing out how high schoolers think that they know everything, but they actually don't really know a whole lot of anything.
Yeah.
Um, which is just, it's so perfect in Otis's counseling of his classmates and how horrible of a job he does at that sometimes.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
demonstrating that he makes mistakes and, you know, we're all just sort of learning as we go, but also
yeah,
demonstrating how little they all know about sex education, which is something that is so very relatable here in Canada and in the US,
yes.
particularly because our sex education is awful here. At
Hmm.
least the sex education I received in public school is what I'm referring to, and I'm aware
Same.
that most public schools have terrible sex education.
um, I think it was worse when we were in grade school than it is now. Well, was a few years ago. And now it's
Yeah.
kind of reverted back to being bad again. Um, but yeah, so it's a really important thing to talk about because I'm a little bit ashamed to say it, but a lot of the things that they talked about in this high school based drama comedy about sex and sex education, I learned for the first time at 28 years old because of that show.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, and this is why we're doing this podcast because representation matters. Oh my
totally.
goodness. Because yeah, I mean, absolutely that's
Hmm.
probably a typical response because of what I know about the education system here in Canada. Like, yeah, people aren't learning about this stuff unless they're looking for it. And
Yeah.
I think that I've been um, interested in sexuality and sex and learning about that for a long time. So I think I take advantage of how much I know about it. But yeah, totally. I think
Hmm.
there's a lot of stuff in that show that would be educational in the sense that they're just talking about it as like this funny, like interesting show,
Hmm.
but it prompts you to be like, "Oh, I don't think I know that." And then you can maybe go do your own research and like figure out your body better or your feelings or your identity or whatever
Hmm.
comes up. And so I love that it does a good job of representing sort of the different aspects of sexuality and identity and um, not necessarily gender, but um, certainly in some minute ways.
Hmm. To be fair, Jean Milburn is a sex therapist, not
Mhm.
a sex and gender therapist.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
and while those intersect, um, again, in the area that they are in a small rural town in England, I mean, how many same sex couples is she going to be treating? How
Mhm.
many people are going to. There is one couple, though, that I'm curious as to what she was doing in her therapy sessions with them, because when they came in, she asked the wife or female presenting person in the relationship in this seemingly cisgendered heterosexual relationship, um, how she's enjoying her penis.
Mm,
And so, but like no pronouns are ever exchanged. We don't know
interesting.
how this person identifies. And then the issue that this couple has come to Jean with, is um, the quote unquote wife doesn't think that the husband wants to have sex with them anymore.
Right.
So I'm curious to know if that was just like um, a gaining power over herself, um, like weirdly patriarchal thing of like, have your own penis to feel that power in the relationship kind of thing, or is that person a trans man that is coming out much later in life and they're coming to terms with that?
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. That's a really good question. Um,
I don't
that
think we'll ever get an answer.
I don't think so either, but it's interesting to talk about and think about because that's like the cool thing about these shows, I think, because they prompt more thought and research
Mhm.
potentially if people are interested in it. And
Definitely.
so, I mean, that's what I appreciate about these shows. Because they're about social issues and I mean clearly I care about social issues in general, but I also appreciate media that is depicting or prompting me to think about these issues more or in a different way, and so
Hmm.
that's super interesting. Yeah, and I think there's
Yeah.
only one like adult gay couple that I can think of in the show, which is the two moms of like the jock sort of
Yeah.
um
Jeremy, I think his name is.
yeah, the male character that's sort of the
The
jock
swimmer.
in the school.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. As far as I'm aware, that's the only adult same sex couple as well. Hmm. Um, oh, let's talk about vagina shaming.
Oh, so much to be said.
There's so much to be said. So,
Yeah.
so there's this thing in society where first, like somehow it came about where the textbook anatomy image of a vagina is what every person with a vagina is expected to have. And that's just not the case.
No.
There's so much variation between like I don't know, vaginas are like snowflakes. Like no two are gonna be the same. And
Yeah. Like
like so this
particularly vulvas and labias. Like
yes. Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. So in this particular episode, um one of the characters had sent a photo with her face, unfortunately, also in the photo of her, like a ridiculously close up photo of her uh, like vulva.
Hmm.
Um, and then it got passed around the whole school because smartphones are a thing now. And
And it's high school.
And it's high
Clearly.
school.
Like,
Yeah, never mind the fact that it's technically child pornography and completely illegal, but like we'll sidestep that a little bit. And everyone in the school starts talking about this um ugly vulva. They call it a minge in Britain. Um and like all these people are talking, and obviously she can hear them, and they're all talking being like, I would be mortified if that was mine, and oh my god, look at this part of it is so weird, blah 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 blah. But like we need more. And okay, the porn industry does not help,
oh gosh, no. Yeah, no.
because a lot of the porn stars out there and porn actresses um have had reconstruction done so
Yeah.
that they fit that ideal aesthetic of a vulva, which is like, yes, in air quotes, if you're not watching this on YouTube. Like it's horrifying. And and the whole episode was so cringy because of the blackmail that was happening
Yeah.
about this person's vulva or minge or whatever.
Yeah. It's just rooted in patriarchy and just perpetuating this like really prevalent shame that is involved in women's socialization or female presenting people's socialization.
People with
Um,
people with vaginas.
yeah, I mean, it's just like so I personally have had to work through a lot of that shame myself, and I know that I mean many other people do, and some people don't ever really get to that because they're not necessarily interested or want to do that self work. But
Hmm.
it's just so um heartbreaking to understand that this is not a unique experience, and that's why it's being presented in this show as,
Hmm.
you know, an issue to be addressed, because the shaming of women's bodies in general and especially their sex organs, um yeah, it's just heartbreaking. I don't know if I
Yeah.
have much else to say about it because it's yeah.
No, I agree. It's, yeah, the whole episode is just like awful to watch, but like so important to watch at the
Yeah.
same time. Um uh I mean, I don't really have a whole lot more to say about that because I think we kind of covered it. I mean, don't vulva shame people.
Yeah,
You know, like,
agreed.
yeah. Um
Yeah, we're all self-conscious enough, no matter who you are. Like, let's just not perpetuate shame for
mhm,
anything anymore, okay?
yeah,
Let's just
totally.
be better people. How about that?
Yeah. What else can we talk about? Sexual assault and victim blaming.
Yeah.
So I remember and this I believe was also in the second season,
Mhm.
where one of the characters, Amy, is on the public transit bus, and a man is brushing up against her and pleasuring himself on the bus. She then runs off of the bus and tries to hide everything. I do think that the show did this really well.
Mhm.
They didn't present it in a way where she was like horribly, horrifically traumatized immediately, and then by the end of the episode was over it. They showed her going through all of the stages of grief, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, me too.
Um, and then she goes to the police.
Yeah, never a fun thing.
No.
Just probably a good time to, like, interject and just say, if anyone is listening to this, maybe go listen to our intro episode because we talk about how we're both police abolitionists. And so that's just something that we are sort of, we believe in or
Yeah.
we want to see the world
That's the lens
shift
that we're
into. Yeah, the
yeah,
lens. Yeah, thank
the
you.
lens that we're operating from.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And I mean, any person, any person that has experienced any variant of sexual assault that has then gone to the police knows how completely unhelpful that they are.
Yeah. I would
It's
even argue
all
that
it.
it's
Mhm.
further traumatizing because the police
Yes.
literally help no one with sexual assault.
Yep.
They don't.
Nope.
In fact,
They try to find every way possible to show why it happened to the victim based on the victim's own actions.
yeah,
So in Amy's situation, the police officer, a man, obviously, fully asked, like, complete. I'm so. Anyway, sorry. She's in describing what happened to her on the bus after Maeve convinced her to go to the police. And Amy's recounting the story, and the police officer looks at her and says, "Well, did you smile at him?" As if her smiling at him gives him the permission to violate her like that,
which
which
is
is just, it's so common.
yeah, it's that's the predominant view of how sexual
What,
assault
yeah.
is in our
What
society,
did
and
you
that's
do?
a
Were
problem.
you drunk? Did you fight enough? Did you, and there's all these, there's like mugshots of men that have literal like claw marks all over their face and necks from the women from their victims trying to fight back, and the police still somehow are saying, well, you probably should have tried harder. Like, if he was able to do that to you, then obviously you must have wanted it or allowed it in some way, ignoring the fact that women get murdered for this.
Yeah, all the
You know,
time. Not to
Huh.
mention the horrendous backlog of rape kits that
Yep,
just never actually get
never get processed.
processed.
Yep.
Like, yeah,
Um,
if you're sexually assaulted, you probably will never get anything from the police that
yep.
is anything close to
Short
justice.
of getting everything on video with audio from start to finish, and even then, probably not.
Exactly. And then it's a long process of, I mean, initially humiliation, because
Hmm.
going to the police, they will do anything that they can to humiliate you in that moment because they have the power to do so.
Hmm.
Especially if you're a BIPOC person, there's so many reports of being strip searched or, you know, made to sit in a room alone, um, and just like violently treated
Hmm.
when you're a victim of this horrific thing, and it makes you not want to come forward,
Yep.
because the justice system literally does not work for victims of sexual assault or rape.
Hmm. And in Canada, um, if you do get to the point of pressing charges and going to trial, you as the victim are not permitted legal representation in that courtroom. You have to represent yourself, and because you're not the one on trial, you have the onus of proof. You have to prove that without any legal representation whatsoever, you are not permitted into the courtroom at all until it is your turn to speak. And like, it's just, the whole system is so broken for victims of sexual assault.
Yeah.
It is completely horrendous. So if you are, or someone that is a victim of sexual assault, I strongly urge you to look into resources in your area that
Hmm.
are not the police, because they are out there and they
Yeah.
exist. There's organizations that are led by other victims of sexual assault and sexual abuse that will be there to help you. They've become lawyers, they have the team that they need. So they will likely be able to administer a rape kit and actually get it tested
Hmm.
far faster. than the police would ever. So I highly, highly, highly urge you to seek out those resources in your area.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that because it's really important, and there are lots of resources for the
Mhm.
most part. Many of them are in urban centers, so I will say that many rural people might not have as easy access, but but there are online resources and like telephone crisis lines, things like that, that will be able to help you in crisis
Mhm.
if you are a victim of sexual assault.
Yeah. This episode got really dark and really heavy really fast, and I was not actually expecting that from this episode at all, because the
Yeah.
show is framed as a comedy.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it's quite an entertaining show and sort of lighthearted and talking about these
Mhm.
like funny things that are, happen with sex and the misinformation that gets spread around the school and things. But
Mhm.
just before we move on, I do want to just reiterate too that I think that they did a really good um, job of depicting how sort of the stages of grief happen throughout that season with that particular character Amy and her struggle to sort of you know go back on the bus and things like that. Like these things
Mhm.
become really difficult for folks when you've been through a trauma like that, and it doesn't, yeah, it doesn't make it better right away. Like it doesn't, the severity of it
Mhm.
necessarily isn't um shouldn't be questioned, I guess.
Yeah. Let's let's try to make this a little bit lighter now.
Yeah.
What are some funny things that happened on the show? Um,
I mean, I think masturbation is like a really interesting thing on the show because it's like I feel as though many people are shamed for masturbating, and like the show
absolutely.
I think is just like very funny in the sense that um generally speaking I think boys are like sort of more encouraged to masturbate as like adolescents, and
Mhm.
the main character is sort of this adolescent boy that's struggling to be able to masturbate. And so it's like interesting and funny because his mom is a sex therapist and like, he knows all of this knowledge about sex, but like can't seem to bring himself to like masturbate. And so
I
I
think
think
one of
that's a
my
really funny
favorite
thing.
yeah, one of my favorite things in that aspect, is in the first episode, he, like, sets the scene to, like, trick his mom into thinking that he has actually
Yeah.
masturbated. Um, like, he pulls out the porn magazine, like, a really, actually, like, ancient one, to be honest. Like, it looks like it's from the 60s or 70s. Um, and, uh and some lotion and a couple of tissues and like squirts the lotion into the tissues and then crumples them up and leaves all of this on his bed strategically for his mother to find. Um, which I think is absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, it's so funny, and sort of the juxtaposition of how the show's premise is sort of this young boy that is trying to figure out his own sexuality and be able to masturbate, but then he like gets put into this position of like knowledge and power of like giving people advice when he hasn't actually had sex or masturbated even himself. And
Yeah,
so yeah, so I think it's a really funny um juxtaposition, and it just makes the show like lighthearted and
yeah,
just nice to watch. It's entertaining.
totally. Um, what else? What else we oh, the STIs. Okay, that was one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah.
Was it chlamydia or was it gonorrhea?
I do not remember.
Okay, I know it was one of those two. I just don't
Yeah.
remember which one. Honestly, hands down, my favorite episode of the season
Oh,
of the
really?
series.
Okay. Why?
So, So there's an outbreak of whichever one of the STIs it is. And sorry, it's so funny. Um, there's so much misinformation being spread about how that STI can be spread from person to person. Um, to the point, they were all doing something like completely ridiculous in the show, like wearing like face masks or something because they thought that it was like airborne, but like it has to be genital to genital contact for this
Right.
STI to spread.
Yeah.
But they were so sure that like parents and teachers and like all of these people are like falling into this trap of believing that this STI is airborne and you can just like catch it from being in the same room. Um, Actually, let me just really quickly. I just
think,
want to find the scene where they're having the assembly and this is
oh yeah.
happening because like I can't remember what their like preventative measures that they took.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think
are.
my favorite part of that episode was the principal sort of falling into, because he's very like this sort of like,
Yeah,
upright
very
person.
posh.
It's like,
Yeah.
that, and then he's like wearing a mask or something in one scene, and you're like, wait, like, aren't you an adult and like you should know better that like these
Yeah.
STIs are spread by like fluid contact?
Yeah.
Like,
Okay, so it is chlamydia.
right, okay.
Yeah,
I feel like
they're all like wearing face masks.
in the assembly.
Yeah. I don't remember how. I think it was like the first person to like get it thought that from sharing an instrument or like a tune whistle
Mm,
or
I
something
don't
was
remember.
how it was spread. Yeah, so there's this misinformation about the chlamydia outbreak, and the students, parents, teacher, like faculty of the school are wearing face masks to try to prevent the spread of chlamydia. When obviously that's not how you spread it. It needs to be spread through bodily fluids and direct contact with. Okay, now that's not to say that you can't get throat chlamydia because you can,
Oh, for sure, yeah.
but you have to perform oral on a person that has chlamydia to get chlamydia of the throat. So that you can't kiss somebody that has genital chlamydia and get throat chlamydia. That's not how it works. So for them to all be wearing face masks, to be like, there's an outbreak of chlamydia in our school, I'll wear a
Yeah.
face mask. And I don't know if this was like an intentional thing in the show to like illustrate wearing protection in a way that they could actually show it in the television show.
That's an interesting point.
Which could be a very interesting like cinematography, like
Like a choice.
metaphorical trick.
Totally.
Yeah, I don't know that that's the case, but that's just something that popped into my head.
Yeah.
But I think that it is so hilarious because we need to normalize talking about STIs and how they're spread, and the fact that most of them are curable.
Oh,
So
totally.
like even if you get it,
And
I
like,
mean, unless it's like a permanent one that can't be cured,
but
like it's
even
gonna be
those
okay.
are like very manageable, and you
Yes.
cannot, like, you don't have to, it's not a big deal. Like, let's
Yeah.
just say STIs, not a big deal. STDs, not a big deal. Just like, be chill, disclose. If you have one, it's fine. People shouldn't be weird about it.
Mhm.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
and please, my gosh, please, like, be informed of how you can catch these things, because they're sexually transmitted.
Yeah.
They need
And
sexual
and
contact
please
for
get
the most part.
tested regularly if you
Yes.
are like having any kind of, I mean, okay, so it's COVID-19. Chances of people actually being out there sleeping around right now, pretty low. However,
I mean, there are
well,
people, I'm sure.
of course there are people that are doing that, but I feel like it's significantly lower of a percentage now than it was pre-COVID.
Fair.
Um, and honestly, that is not even the highest concern of like something that you could catch if you're sleeping with a random person right now. But yeah, like get tested, normalize getting tested. It's really
Yes.
not that bad.
No, oh my gosh. It's like
It's
it's not a big deal.
it's either a swab or a blood test or a saliva sample or something, like depending on what you're getting tested for. Like
Yeah.
it's really truly not a big deal.
Yeah,
Um
sometimes they take urine too. Like,
yeah,
it's not a big deal.
it's really not. Like it's not invasive.
No.
Um that being said, if you are in the States and medical care is too expensive for you, Planned Parenthood also conducts those tests. There's options. So go get tested.
Yes, and I will say that Planned Parenthood is a resource that is usually for free because it's funded by the
Mhm.
government. So please vote
Yes.
accordingly. There's an election coming up for those friends of ours in the USA. Please vote for the people that are not going to defund things like Planned Parenthood because these are resources that are super crucial for health of communities, particularly women's health.
hmm Um, Speaking of Planned Parenthood,
Hmm.
another topic that is covered in the show that I didn't list, and I don't know why I didn't list it, is abortion.
Hmm.
One of the characters early on in season one receives an abortion. And the discrepancies of, if you listened to our episode on Dear White People, the discrepancy of accessing medical care in England versus the United States is going to already be drastically different,
Yeah.
because England has universal health care.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it's important to bring it back to how easy it was for the character in Sex Education to get an abortion.
Yeah.
It was portrayed as being so simple,
Yeah.
and they were shown as being incredibly caring. There were some religious fanatics protesting outside of the abortion clinic, which is just par for the course, really. No matter
I
where
mean,
you are, I feel like
it's
that's
quite
going to happen.
common. Yeah.
Yeah. Um. I thought that was something that we could bring back to
Yeah,
our
yeah,
first
totally.
episode.
And I think that yeah, the discrepancy between sort of these countries that have single payer healthcare systems or universal healthcare systems versus the USA, uh, it's drastic, it's stark, and I have to just state my privilege here because growing up and living in Canada, like it's not something I have had to really concern myself over because we do also have universal health care because we're a Commonwealth country with the UK, which relates to the location of this show.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, we haven't always had it, but it's something that I think that I take advantage of because I've always had access, and I appreciate that um, that they depicted it in a way that is. I mean, that's the reality here in Canada too. Like, yeah, it's a clinic. You go and you get your
Mhm.
health care taken care of, and it's not going to cost you thousands of dollars just for a visit. Or I mean, emotionally, it might be awful because any
Mhm.
traumatic thing or any experience where you're faced with protesters, um, that's that's not a great thing,
Mhm.
and it does happen often. But yeah, I mean, access to abortions
Mhm.
is a human right, and I think that everyone
Yep.
should have access to abortions.
Agreed. I really appreciated the way that the medical staff acted
Mm,
in that whole scene. Like it was very much treated just like as a standard routine medical procedure, like if she had been getting like her tonsils out, or any like fixing a broken bone or something like that. Like it was very like kind and gentle, like, okay, like lie down here. Okay, are you right or left handed? And then they did the IV in the other hand and blah blah blah. Like it was done in a, yeah, like it wasn't portrayed in like a negative light whatsoever. Like honestly, if we didn't know for sure that this was an abortion clinic and we didn't know for sure that she was having one,
Hmm.
honestly, she could have been there for anything.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing to bring up because going back to the topic of shame, I think that there is a lot of shame from medical workers on occasion, and people experience this all the time, whether you live, wherever you live,
Mhm.
because people have their own sort of belief systems, and abortion's one of those ones that is so heavily tied to religious belief that
Yes.
it can be a source of shame, and many medical practitioners do not make people feel comfortable or um, you
Mhm.
know okay when they're in those situations that are already emotionally difficult and
Yeah.
taxing. So yeah, so I also agree that that's like it's great how it sort of is portrayed in the show.
Mhm. Um, and I don't know if this was intentional on the creators' part of the show or not, but I kind of really appreciated how they portrayed the protesters as being like incredibly hypocritical religious fanatics.
Mm.
Um, there's this point where the boyfriend in the couple is apparently he's born again. So prior to his religious awakening and you know transference to being an upstanding Christian boy or whatever, was very active sexually. And the girlfriend is very upset with him because she has just found out that before they got together, before he was born again, he had had sex with other girls. And she believes that he has cheated on Jesus because marriage or sex is a sacred thing that happens between a man and a woman on their wedding night, blah, 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 whatever. And then Otis is counseling this girl and says something along the lines of, I mean, you shouldn't be embarrassed if he's more experienced than you are. And she says, oh, I've got plenty of experience, and goes on to list every sexual act that you could possibly do with another human being aside from vaginal penetration.
Wow, yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's so
because
interesting.
in her mind, and I've actually heard this from like a few people that I know that went to Catholic school growing up,
Hmm.
that there's loopholes
Yeah,
to maintaining your purity. And as
yeah.
long as you don't break the hymen, you're still a virgin no matter what else you're doing.
Hmm.
So I just really appreciated the call out of the hypocrisy of that person's religious faith.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I totally appreciate that too. It's so refreshing to watch a show that is representing these issues that we all face and we all know are a thing, but don't have to be
Mhm.
stigmatized, and they don't have to be shameful.
Yeah.
They can just be, part of the lived experience, the part of the human experience. I mean, I, it's frustrating to me when
Mhm.
people are um, so involved in these sort of societal confines of what you think, sex and sexuality and sex acts
Yeah.
are. It's yeah,
Yeah.
I would love to just destigmatize a lot of that because sex is absolutely normal, and as long as it's consensual,
Sex
as
is
long
not shameful.
it's not
It's
shameful.
not. I don't know if people can actually read that or not, but yeah. Okay, I've got a few things that I want to. So I found an article where the actor who plays Eric, Chudi Gatwa, is interviewed and discusses how he uh, portrayed Eric and not wanting Eric to become the stereotypical or stock or tokenized gay black best friend. Um, so he actually said in the interview that the creator of the show ensured that Eric's character had a lot of depth to him, and to make sure that he was more than just a black gay teen. I also found there's two things from this article that I didn't know that I'm really, really, really happy about. So first, the entire writing staff, for at least for season 1, all of them are women. And
So
Eric
amazing.
actually, or not Eric, that's the character. And Judy said that he believes that the fact that all of the writing staff are completely women is the reason that the show is so progressive and so fresh. And I agree with him.
Me too.
He also talked about Eric's prom look for the show in the final episode of season 1. If you haven't seen the show, 1, watch the show.
Yeah.
But also, if you haven't seen it and you're curious about the prom outfit, look it up. It's so stunning. It's so
good.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So that look was actually made in Ghana.
Oh wow.
They had 2 suits made for him. Both were made in Ghana, and he got to choose which one he wore.
I love that.
Yeah, so he said, quote, having those suits made for me in Africa for my African body made so much of a difference. And I love that so much.
That's so beautiful. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about like affirming and, representing people properly. My goodness.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It was great. I really appreciated the fact that like they didn't have like some white costume designer make this outfit for him, and they actually like outsourced it to Ghana to have this traditional look made for this character. Anyway, so those are my 2 things.
I think that sort of transcends more of what even we started this podcast for. Like, we were looking at representations in film and media, but that sort of transcends it. It's outside of the actual screen that you're watching. It's like, yes, like you're the way you approach a show, having all women as writers talking about sex is so important, because that is not something that's necessarily portrayed anywhere else. Let's be real. Like, this is an industry dominated by people who are in places of power that are white men, and it's often white men depicting stories about women, people of color, all of the things, and that's like part of why these caricatures become a thing. And so representation is so important for that. My goodness, I love that. And like I say, like it's a way to sort of be inclusive. Like, you don't just have to have representation in your characters and your actors and all of that, like the costume design, the people who work on your set, the writers. Like, man, I love that so much. I can't say anything bad about that.
No. I think that's about all.
I think I just wanted to also mention, we talked about masturbation a little bit, but we didn't talk about what happens in season 2 with, I can't remember the character's name, but there's sort of the nerdy gal that is on there.
Lily.
And yes, thank you. Yeah, and she goes through a process of sort of, I also don't remember what it's called.
Oh, where she's dilating because she has vaginismus.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and so there's, and that is so wonderful because, again, I think that depiction of, just an issue that many people with vulvas and vaginas face, like that's something that
Mhm.
happens to a lot of people, and a lot of people don't know that that's a thing that can happen, and they just think that they're broken or something's
Yeah.
wrong or something else happened or whatever, and so
Mhm.
they sort of um, portray that as, like they explain what it is and how it works, and
Yeah.
they show the tools that she uses to like help herself in that situation. And
Yeah.
I also really love the relationship she gets into in the second season.
Me too. There's many more things that we could talk about with this. The quote that we posted on our Instagram for this episode is specifically about asexuality, and I thought that
Mm.
it was so beautiful, and it just kind of like sums everything I think up that we're talking about for this episode of, sex isn't shameful, and just because something isn't portrayed as being the norm or being normative for sex or sexuality or bodies or anything like that does not mean that there's something wrong with you.
Yes.
And that's brought up in conversations about homophobia or homosexuality, asexuality, pansexuality, um, the vulva shaming that we talked about earlier, masturbation, like all of the things, STIs, like, there's the whole premise of this show is to remove and reduce the shame and the stigma around those things. And I appreciate the show so much for that.
Yeah, me too. This is such a well done show. I do encourage everybody who hasn't seen it to go and watch it, because it
Hmm.
is really a great depiction of, some of the funny and serious stuff that we encounter when it comes to sex. And we don't talk
Yeah.
about this stuff as often as we should. And I think that, like you said before, Jenna, I think we need to just start talking about this stuff so that we can destroy the stigmas and destroy the shame involved, because these are just normal things, and it's funny, and sometimes it's
Hmm.
serious, and sometimes there's misinformation that you need to know about.
Totally.
All right, well, I guess we'll conclude this episode. So thank you everyone for listening to this episode of Critical Rep. You can find us on all socials at Critical Rep Pod. That's Critical Rep Pod with 1P. Or email us at criticalreppodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's with 1P. So also, please like us and share on whatever platform you prefer. Write us a review on iTunes and subscribe on YouTube. The Critical Rep podcast is hosted by Jenna and Kat, myself, two people who want to explore the world of representation in popular film media. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Until next time, think critical and remember, representation matters.